an age where a lot of things are being outsourced. But when it comes to this kind of research, you cannot outsource it. You got to get there. You got to be there, right? You present yourself. You got to gather the information. You got to record. You got to observe. You got to determine who's doing what, how, when, why, because that's how you're going to tap into that richness. And then you record, you interview, because these are reliable tools. You cannot rely on your memory. You've got to capture them as they unfold, right? And of course, the analysis will follow. Right, now I've got a diagram here that I want to share with you quickly. And I will give you the source of this diagram. It's from a very interesting article, which I will put in the references for you as well at the end of this presentation. Here's a model on research design for qualitative studies, right? And there you have the theoretical framework on the left-hand side. Now, this is where students battle as well. How do I locate my topic within a theoretical framework? And I don't want to go into too much detail because that's really the first stage of this workshop, really, which was the workshop 1 around how you locate your studies within a theoretical paradigm. But it's important to locate it within a theoretical paradigm because that's your locus standi, your legitimacy of your whole research. The research strategy. What kind of strategies are you going to embark on for this particular research? If it's a qualitative study, what are some of the strategies you're going to use? What are some of the research designs you're going to use? Right? And then we move on to the bottom, the research setting. Right? Where is the research taking place? I have to be part of it. I have to get there. I have to be involved in it. And then what kind of methodology are we going to use? What are some of the tools that you're going to use? And can you see the connecting point of all of this is your research questions? Okay, that's very important. Right, now I'll talk to you about the ontology and the epistemology just now. Okay, now let's view this model very quickly. Your theoretical framework I mentioned to you, which is really a foundation for your research, right? And if you're not really grounded on that, then you need to speak to your supervisor. You need to read literature. You need to read discourse relating to your particular field of study. Get an understanding of it. Bring it to a very contemporary focus. Don't leave it in, umpteen years ago. Bring it to the more contemporary era of that theoretical framework. Then what is ontology? Ontology is how one sees reality, right? How do you see reality? It's not a case of fictitious and dressing it up, but the reality of things. How does one see the reality? The epistemology part is how the researcher thinks about the social phenomena and how it should be studied. And these are two very important aspects of qualitative study, ontology and epistemology, very important areas. Right, I just want to share, I thought this was a very interesting expression by this author. And he says that the difference between ontological viewpoints is the conception of knowledge as a mirror of reality. It's replaced by the conception of the social construction of reality, where the focus is on interpretation and negotiation of the meaning of the social world. And if you extract anything from this quotation, interpretation and negotiation of the meaning of the social world in which you are examining your research. How do you interpret that? Right? How do you make sense of it? Okay, now just want to share the next few slides. I want to talk to you a little bit about this mixed method and not to go too much into the quantitative because my brief is really to introduce this qualitative story to you. But I want to ask you a question, and it's a rhetorical question at this point because you remember we're doing questions at the end. Are you having a paradigm war? Right? In research, there's lots of wars that you'll be fighting, some self-induced and sometimes wars with your supervisor as well. But are you having this paradigm war? You know, how do I locate it into a mind, into a thought process, into a paradigm? And there are certain words that are synonymous with qualitative study in terms of paradigm thinking. One is the positivist paradigm, again, bombastic words, right? And just to give you very little, about 2 or 3 minutes, a history of this, it actually was dominant from the 1950s, so it's been around since before we were even conceived, guys, right? Some of us. Okay, I'm being kind, Brian. Then you got the constructivist interpretist, which is dominant from the 1970s, right? And then you got this third methodological dimension, the mixed method that a lot of students are latching onto today, the mixed method approach, right? Okay, now let's define what these words mean, because they have a definite home in qualitative studies. And if you are using them, then you need to use them very appropriately, right? 3 important perspectives I want to share with you. One is the objectivism. When we talk about objectivism, coming from objective, right? You know, we say, be objective, don't be subjective, right? Don't be emotionally charged, subjective. The real world must be discovered through a very systematic approach. Research is all about being systematic, you know. When I put comments on my students' research proposals, I often say systematic, coherent, consistent, right? With 3 exclamations, okay. Realism is you reaching an interpretive understanding, and I think that's where we battle when we use this qualitative approach. How do I interpret it, ma'am? I've got the data with me. How do I interpret it? How do I make sense of it, right? What kind of tools from the research methods do I use to interpret the data so it makes significance, it makes significant meaning to it, right? Constructionism. No truth out there, but reality that changes all the time, isn't it? If you put people into a setting, it's going to change, because as the environment changes, their moods are going to change, their behavior is going to change, and what you record now might change radically later. That's why the shelf life of our research is so important, guys. If you take on a study and you take umpteen years to complete it, the data you collected may have changed substantially, because there may have been certain factors that may have caused that study to change. And therefore you hear your supervisor saying, the shelf life of that study has come and gone, okay, as long as you haven't expired. Your research might expire, okay. Right, so 3 important words in qualitative study: objectivism, realism, and constructionalism, right? And I think if you have a blend of the 3, you're going to get some richness attached to it. Right, now a little bit about the mixed method, because a lot of students are latching onto this mixed method, right? Criswell and Garrett said that it's this 3rd movement, right, that people are latching onto, as opposed to qualitative exclusively, quantitative exclusively, but there you got the marriage between the 2 now. 5 minutes, thank you. I'm almost done. Right, now, when it comes to educational research, and which is what we primarily do in higher education, right? It's evidence-based inquiry, isn't it? You have to produce the evidence. There's many things you can say in your research, but do you have the evidence to prove it? Is your empirical chapter providing the evidence to prove that, okay? The information is rich because it's evidence-based. It's positivist, post-positivist, interpretive, constructionist, transformative, mind-blowing, isn't it? And pragmatic paradigms. What's pragmatic? Where you're actually making sense of it. You're getting to it. You're not just sitting aloof away from it. And qualitative, quantitative, or the mixture of both. Okay, now some of the mixed methods. How do we advance mixed methods, right? We use mixed methodology, we use multi-methods, or multiple methods. We use different methodology. We call it blended research. We call it triangulation studies, hybrid studies, investigative, but they all boil down to mixed methods. Right, now, I'm not going to go into the quantitative because that's not my brief, but just to mention to you that with your quantitative, you've got your questionnaires, you've got your empiricals, you've got your surveys, you have to have your experimental design, your quasi-experimental design, your data analysis, your frequencies, your histogram pie charts, your ANOVA, your different statistical approaches, how you're going to make sense of them. And I don't want to go into the detail of that because in the interest of time for this particular research topic. Right, so since 98, I gave you 1950s, 1970s, now since 2008, research has won the war in terms of qualitative, so it's becoming more prevalent and we're becoming more affectionately attached to it, right? However, no evidence yet because mixed methods has emerged as a methodological champion. Right, it's becoming a champion that people are wanting to advance, and these authors are saying that, right? So you can see the reference is 2010, so it's becoming more prevalent in this day and age. Okay, how do you interpret the information observed in your natural environment? We spoke about that, right? My last 2 slides. What is the strengths of qualitative, using qualitative studies? What are some of the strengths, the niceties, the joys of using it? Yes, it can complement other approaches fantastically. That's why we're using it in tandem with quantitative, because it can complement quantitative. Yes, it provides suggestive leads for exploratory research, and sometimes you make a recommendation after your empirical, and students say that this study can be explored further at an advanced level or by further researchers, right? There's depth and meaning to the surveys and the results because you have observed it in a natural phenomenon. You get an inside view of reality because you're actually there at the scene of it, as opposed to sitting in some place looking at archived information. You understand the substance, the coherence, the maintenance of the views of your participants. And there is a degree of flexibility around it. It's appropriate for studying rapidly dynamic environments, like I gave you the natural disaster. It allows for emergence of new ideas, which I think that's very important in research. New ideas, what new can you bring to the table, especially at a doctoral level. And of course, it's susceptible to new insights. So there's fantastic niceties around qualitative, but there's also some challenges that we face, some weaknesses. It can be very costly. Why? Because you have to travel, you have to have money, you have to have resources to actually get there. And sometimes the scene is so remotely away from where you are, and you have to actually gear yourself up to go there. So research is expensive when it's qualitative, especially if you are very distantly, remotely attached to the location where it's going to take place. Yes, it's labor intensive. You have to put a lot of effort into it. You have to have the tools for it. You're recording it. You've got to have the equipment for it, the appropriate equipment for it. And of course, it's time consuming. Sometimes you can spend years sitting and collecting richness of data. And the disadvantage is sometimes you might lose focus or you might lose interest in it, right? Because you're attached to it. And of course, research is time bound as well. Not compromising the integrity of the process, but it is time bound as well. Okay, so you can't stage a demonstration to observe people. You can't actually say, right, I want you to play out how you're going to react to this tsunami, how you're going to react to this political speech that has taken place. You've got to observe them as they unfold, right? So if you start to create the environment, then you're manipulating it. And in research, there is no manipulation. It's unethical for us to manipulate the situation. Okay, I just put some useful references up, but don't try to take it down because I'm going to give you, when we upload the slides, there's going to be, I've handpicked some very pertinent qualitative resources that you could use if you are on this qualitative journey. You've listened very attentively, today, and I've come to the end of the presentation. Everything today is about ROI, return on investment. And I think by you attending these workshops, there must be some demonstrable outcomes that's going to come out of it. So wherever you are in your research journey, I hope you find your space through these workshops and that you go and address the gray areas, you tighten up those proposals, or if you are in the throngs of writing up your research, and that you actually use these presentations to enrich, because you will have them thereafter, to enrich your research. Remember, research is a journey, and you need to enjoy that ride. And how do you enjoy that ride? You have to get affectionately attached to your research, and you have to instill passion in the purpose of your research. So I wish you all the best with your research, guys. Thank you for listening to me.